Yeah, so we're going with the Los Angeles Rams here at number one. I mean, this is already a very good team from last year. They obviously lost Brandon Staley, which might move their defense down a little bit, but I still think there's a ton of really good players in that defense. And then, I mean, the clear cut option at number one is that they are, oh, hi, dog. They are borderline elite at quarterback now, which is what they were not last season. They're borderline elite now with Matthew Stafford coming in. And I think this raises the ceiling of this team even further to where they're already a Super Bowl contender. They might be one of the 2 or 3 favorites in the NFC this season. I think that this is a terrific team from top to bottom. They've said, screw you, first round picks. We're going for a Super Bowl. And they might just do it this season. So I got the Rams here at number one in the NFC West.
Yeah, this is the right decision. This is the team I have as number one as well. It feels kind of this feels like a championship contending team. It all starts with the head coach Sean McVay, who was I gave us a 6th best in my coaching rankings. So here's someone I want to give a shout out to: Raheem Morris, defensive coordinator for the Rams. Sean McVay does such a good job of getting defensive coordinators. Raheem Morris feels like the kind of guy who is going to come in here, light the world on fire, and in a year or two get a head coaching gig.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, there was debate that he should have got one this year, right? So, I mean, I think it's going to be a really good situation for him. It still allows the Rams to kind of be great at defense, and McVay kind of gets to hand it off on someone who is really good at his job. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this group because is he going to basically say, hey, this worked last season, let's keep it the same? Is he going to add some of his own stuff? I don't know how much his in Staley's system translate. But overall, I still think it's going to be a pretty good group because the talent's there.
Yeah, I would imagine from what I've seen with Morris, and again, he was a head coach for Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a bit ago. Again, he might end up being one of the guys who's had a longer gap between being a head coach if he does get another job. Because the way I see him is he tends to coach a little bit egoless, and I think that he probably will do a lot more of what Staley did, and maybe just add some little things to it. I would presume.
I'd imagine so too. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel with this team. They have so much talent, so I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. You already talked about him. Quarterback Matt Stafford. He's tier 2. He's not tier 1, but he's a really good quarterback at this point in his career, and it's definitely an upgrade from Goff.
Yeah, I mean, did you have him 7th or 8th overall?
8th.
8th. Yeah, I mean that seems right. I mean, so I think it's perfectly fair that he's there. And while I don't know he's going to be the MVP of the league, like he's getting some buzz on some some gambling sites for some good odds. Okay. I don't know if he's going to be the MVP of the league. I think he's going to be pretty darn good and put this team in the position to win a lot of games this season and potentially win a Super Bowl. I mean, I just think, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at the two guys and say he's better than Jared Goff, but he's a significant upgrade, I feel like, over Jared Goff that already makes a very good offense even that much more dangerous.
Yeah, and I mean, first off, I do kind of always feel like the dark horse MVP candidate is always a kiss of death. I feel like every time someone says this guy's a dark horse MVP candidate, it ends up horrible. That's just something that I've noticed. But I would say it's like when you can upgrade the quarterback position, it's basically always worth it. I mean, You think about the difference between, according to Mike's ranking system, it's about a 2-win difference from being a tier 4, which is probably where Goff was at last year, to a tier 2 where I have Stafford. You'll give up 2 first-round picks for that, any day of the week.
Yeah, and I should say too, it wasn't even really like a dark horse candidate. There was a stretch in June that I saw he was the 4th highest MVP odds. So there are some people really high on Matt Stafford to have a big season. And I think he is going to be terrific. I don't know if he's going to be the 4th best quarterback in football terrific, but he's going to be up in the conversation.
Yeah, probably not. And maybe they just feel like the Rams will win enough games that, team wins tends to matter for that award. For halfbacks, I like Cam Akers. I believe there's the injury stuff there. You also have Darrell Henderson. It's a tier 3 running back room for me.
Yeah, the Cam Akers thing really hurts. Mm-hmm. I was really looking forward to watching him this season. He's out for the year with the Achilles injury. I still think Henderson's pretty good. That being said, I thought he was a better number 2 option than number 1 option. And this could be like, maybe we'll get a mid-season addition to this team to kind of fix that. But at the same time, I think with their passing game, I think they're going to throw it a ton more than we even expect this season. I think people are already expecting more passes this season. I think it's going to be even further than we expect that. I'm not overly worried about the running game overall.
Yeah, I should also mention, I made this rankings, I created this all like 2 months ago. I have not yet updated the halfback rankings. Maybe, I think they probably would still end up being at tier 3. Maybe it would have dropped. But again, the difference between tier 2, 3, 4, and 5 halfbacks don't do too much. It's only tier 1, which I don't think they are. Wide receiving room. It's a good spot for them. It's tier 3 for me. You have Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods. You have for their number 3 guys, you have Van Jefferson, who I think is a fine number 3. They also added DeSean Jackson and Tutu Atwell, who kind of do a similar thing. I think they're probably going to mainly be used as guys who sort of, can run those jet sweeps and things that the Rams love to do. You also have Tyler Higbee, who's a solid blocker and a very good receiver. It's a tier 3 for me.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of really good options with this group. I think that they're going to be very good. And then I think a sleeper to look at with this team too is Tyler Higbee. I think is just there was some weird numbers that I saw that when Gerald Everett wasn't playing, he was awesome for the Rams. He was an awesome tight end for them. And then when Gerald Everett came back, he kind of, sunk down closer to mid-tier tight end. So he could be another fantasy sleeper for you if you're looking for that. I think he could be an awesome player for this team this year. And then, I think top to bottom, there's just not a whole lot of weaknesses with this group. And if they can get anything out of DeSean Jackson, that's, I think he's a pretty good wide receiver already still, even at his age. If they get anything out of him, this is even better than expected.
Over under for DeSean Jackson, 1 50-plus yard touchdown.
So 2? Yeah, I'll take over.
Yeah, I think I take over too. Good. He's not. The thing about DeSean Jackson, he's one of those players with him having some impact will be like a couple of 70-yard touchdowns.
I mean, they're going to have situations where they're basically sending him and Cooper Kupp deep. And then you have to worry about Robert Woods, Tyler Higbee, and maybe Van Jefferson coming across the middle of the field or working the, mid-tier routes. That's really hard to defend, especially, talents like Kupp and Jackson.
Yeah, some people even say Robert Woods is the best receiver in football. And that by some people, I mean, Troy Aikman said that once, which was insane.
Yeah. Hey, he's a top 5 wide receiver for me. No doubt about it.
Exactly. Offensive line to round out the offense. You have Andrew Whitworth, who, continues to do well. Don't know why Cincinnati gave up on him those years ago. That was stupid. Rob Havenstein. You got for the interior, Davis Edwards and Austin Corbett. You also have Brian Allen, who's kind of been replacement level in 600 career snaps over 2 years. That's probably the weakness of this offensive line, but everywhere else is really good. It's a tier 2 offensive line for me. You can deal with one weaker guy on the interior, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the one thing with, once again, sometimes you can say, oh, when a guy gets hurt, of course, it's going to get worse for them. Andrew Whitworth getting hurt last year really hurt this team, I thought. And he's also 39 now. So, I mean, you can kind of say, oh, it's Whitworth. He'll just keep turning along because that's what he does. But at the same time, I mean, he can't do it forever, too. So I think that's the one question you have with the Rams. But overall, it's still a really good offensive line.
Yeah. So offense, 9th best in football. It gets better when we go over to defense. Their coverage, I actually don't have as tier 1. I have as tier 2. They did lose some talent to Cleveland. Cleveland's got all their guys. You got Jalen Ramsey, though, and Darius Williams, who that's what this defense, in my opinion, that's what the defense is built around. Obviously, Aaron Donald as well, but it's really those 3 guys. The rest is, you have Robert Rochelle at corner, who he was a 4th rounder, and I don't know if he's the 5th DB, but he might be. For the safeties, you have Taylor Rapp and Jordan Fuller, who I think will be fine. Again, you lose a talent. It did happen, but I think they're still okay there. And with linebackers, Troy Reeder, who's sort of an okay all-around guy, and Micah Kaiser, who sucks at coverage, but, the Rams, for whatever reason, no matter how, they could have you and me out there at linebacker and they'd be fine. That's just the way that their defense seems to work. So I have it as tier 2, and the main reason why they're still tier 2 is Ramsey and Williams. The reason why they're not tier 1 is just sort of the depth around that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously losing Johnson and Hill is going to hurt a little bit, but at the same time, they have 2 stars at cornerback, like you said, and this is a coverage group. You've said it this whole thing. Coverage is important. Having 2 really good corners obviously is really going to help your defense. Like you said, they can kind of get away with having bad linebackers because they got terrific coverage guys out there out wide. So I think it's going to be really good again. I'm not too worried about the losses, even though it might hurt it a little bit and it may not be the best secondary in football next season, but it's still, like you said, it's still going to be a top 10 group next year. And it just helps that they have good players up front too.
Yeah, and speaking of that, they got Aaron Donald. I mean, you only need Aaron Donald up front, really, but they have some other guys as well. You have Sebastian Joseph Day, who I've always felt like is a bit underrated. You also have for the edge guys, you got Leonard Floyd, who is good. You have Justin Hollins, who's solid. And I've already mentioned the linebackers. I have this as a tier 1 run defense and a tier 1 pass rush. I don't know where they would be without Aaron Donald, but with Aaron Donald, they're fantastic. So I have this as a tier 2 coverage, tier 1 run defense, tier 1 pass rush. That puts them at the best defense in football for me.
Yeah, breaking news, Aaron Donald's really good at football. That's kind of my analysis of this front seven.
Yeah.
I mean, he just does so much for this team, and I mean, there's no other way to put it. He's fantastic, and he's fantastic. He makes up a lot for this team. He can pass rush, he can defend the run, he can do it all. I think he's a fantastic player, and there's still some good players around him too. I like Leonard Floyd still. There's still plenty of guys on this team. I think they're really talented.
Yeah, like when someone will say, like, oh, I don't know, Khalil Mack is the best edge rusher ever, and someone will say, no, he's not better than Lawrence Taylor, and it just seems like a complete shutdown. I feel like in 10 years from now, someone will say, oh, this is the best defensive tackle in football ever, and we'll say, like, no, he's not Aaron Donald. Like, he just feels like that guy who he's just going to be, he's the Deion Sanders. He's like the obvious best of all time.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be kids who didn't watch him play who just aren't going to understand how dominant he is. So, yeah, I mean, he's fantastic. He makes this group – I mean, he really elevates this group from maybe a top 10 defense to the number 1 defense by himself. That's how crazy it is.
Yeah, and, I'm not even someone who values run, edge rushing or pass rushing, I should say, that highly. But even with where I say, like, where I put it, he's still probably worth the contract because also what he does in the running game as well. I think he's fantastic.
Yeah, and he's almost, set this trend where you're seeing these guys. I know Chris Jones is another one who's kind of the poor man's Aaron Donald, even though he's still fantastic. Where it's just like,
by the way, huge compliment to Chris Jones by saying that. Like it really is. Chris Jones is great, but he probably would be thrilled with that comment.
Yeah, I mean, but isn't it kind of to the point now where you have that kind of – I almost feel like that the pass rushing interior defensive lineman has become more valuable than the edge rusher. And a guy like Donald can really set the trend like that where we're going to see more and more guys like this. And I think that's just going to become the value position on the defensive line. I wouldn't be surprised if there's one day a market shift on this where we're seeing more and more defensive tackles paid compared to defensive ends. And it's because these guys can rush the passer and defend the run from the middle. And I think it's going to change things.
Well, I mean, again, like what the numbers say is that a great run defender is worth more than a great edge rusher, just period.
Yeah, and when he can do both,
right?
Not even pay the edge rusher.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Further, kicker Matt Gay, it's a tier 5. He's shown some flashes. Maybe he can turn it around, but still, 9th best offense, 1st best, or just best defense. This is a 12.2 win team. That's 4th best in the NFL, 2nd best in the NFC. This feels like if it's not Tampa, it's probably the Rams out of the NFC, I would say.
Yeah, I haven't made my full predictions yet, but it really does feel like that it's a 3-team race right now. I think San Francisco can put themselves in the conversation. I still think there's so much talent on that team. And like I said, you just go through that roster and you don't hate anybody on it. And if Lance is good in year 1, maybe they are in that. They make themselves that 4th team. But right now, it just feels like it's Buccaneers, Rams, and Packers, and then we're going to figure it out from there. I think they're still in that conversation, and they're, like I said, they're a terrific team and have some superstars to back it up.
Yeah. So I made a video today that was which teams have the most pressure to win a Super Bowl. The Rams and the Seahawks finished very high on that list. Would you agree with that? I mean, these two teams feel like they're kind of the teams where they lose the Super Bowl, it's a bad season.
The Rams and the Seahawks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. Especially the Rams have invested so much basically into being good right now.
Hmm.
Their window is basically this year and next year. And I think after that is when the money starts, the bill starts having to get paid, or maybe it's after this year. I can't remember off the top of my head. But, they've invested so much into being good right now and making sure this team's ready to win. So yeah, I mean, I think they're number one right now. They've invested so much to make sure McVay gets that Super Bowl. I think the Seahawks are in the conversation because I think people are just so over Pete Carroll right now. And I think part of it is that situation and Wilson, dropping hints that he's unhappy. I would put the Packers at number 2, honestly, though. I think the Packers are ahead of the Seahawks, but behind Los Angeles.
Oh, I think Packers are number one. I think that they, with their whole Aaron Rodgers thing, I think they're the biggest. I put them as number one. I'm just saying these are two of the biggest.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I think it's completely fair.